In the fascinating world of ancient Rome, marriage looked nothing like we imagine it today. At that time, entering into marriage was not a matter of love or the desire to spend one's life with someone special. It was more akin to concluding a business agreement or forming a powerful alliance between families. Surprisingly, for Roman husbands, it was quite normal, even expected, to be unfaithful to their wives. Affairs were not hidden and were not considered shameful as they might be today. In fact, many men had casual relationships with women known as courtesans, or even maintained permanent mistresses outside of marriage. But that is not all. Roman men often engaged in romantic or sexual relationships with other men, and this was considered a normal part of life. To truly understand how the Romans perceived love and attraction, one must abandon modern ideas about relationships and try to see everything from their perspective, where marriage, power, and pleasure were closely intertwined. In ancient Rome, people did not label themselves the way they do today, gay, straight, or bisexual. Instead, they placed greater importance on who controlled the relationship than on who participated in it. In typical relationships between a man and a woman, the man was considered dominant, the giver, and the woman, the receiver. This applied not only to the intimate side, but also to the display of power. When two men were involved in a relationship, things became more complicated. One of them had to take on the role of the receiver, which the Romans considered more feminine and submissive. This position often carried a social stigma for adult men, but not always, especially if the younger partner was still a teenager. One of the known types of same-sex relationships was the so-called pederasty. In this context, an adult man called an erastus formed a bond with a youth known as an eromenos. But it was not only about romance or intimacy. Such relationships often included mentorship, guidance, and assistance in advancing up the social ladder. At that time, a large age difference was considered normal. These relationships did not cause shock as they might today, especially among the wealthy and influential. For the Roman elite, this was considered a normal part of a young man's path to adulthood, providing him with important connections and access to the world of politics and influence. Even among the most powerful men of Rome, emperors, generals, and politicians, it was perfectly normal to have both mistresses and male lovers. What is surprising is that this was not considered infidelity, at least not in the sense we perceive it today. At that time, there were no methods of birth control, and childbirth was one of the most dangerous ordeals a woman could endure. Therefore, when a man had relationships outside of marriage, especially with other men, it was sometimes seen as a way to avoid putting his wife at risk, a sort of ancient form of contraception in a strange and practical sense. In same-sex relationships, the person with greater power, for example, an emperor, was usually expected to take on the dominant masculine role. This demonstrated his strength and authority. But Roman society did not always follow its own rules. Sometimes, even the most powerful men did not live up to these expectations. Believe it or not, Julius Caesar, one of the most famous leaders in Roman history, was rumored to prefer being the more submissive partner in his same-sex affairs. This shocked many people of the time and left Romans puzzled and with plenty of material for gossip, as it did not align with the image of a strong and authoritative ruler. Emperor Hadrian was unlike most Roman rulers. Although he was married to a woman mainly for political reasons, he seemed to show no genuine romantic interest in her. In fact, many historians believe that there was not even physical intimacy between them. This idea is based on the fact that both Hadrian and his wife had numerous lovers of their own, and Hadrian himself devoted most of his attention to men. One young man in particular stood out, a handsome and intelligent youth named Antinous. Hadrian adored him, provided him with an excellent education, and they traveled together across the empire. But their close bond ended in tragedy. While staying in Egypt, Antinous mysteriously drowned in the Nile River. Shaken with grief, Hadrian took radical steps to honor his memory. He built an entire city. Near the place where Antinous died, Hadrian founded a city and named it after him. He even ordered Antinous' body to be mummified and brought back to Rome. Hadrian went so far as to issue coins bearing Antinous' face and declared him a god, something incredibly rare. Worship of Antinous spread throughout the empire. However, Hadrian was not the only emperor with unusual love stories. Emperor Nero also had romantic relationships with men, but his behavior shocked even the Romans. Most emperors chose their lovers from among the palace slaves and still treated them as servants. Nero, however, acted completely differently. He held full wedding ceremony in one case. He married a former slave named Pythagoras, with Nero himself taking the role of the bride, wearing a veil and all, while Pythagoras was the groom. This unsettled the public, as it was expected that the emperor would take the dominant masculine role. Later, Nero married another young slave named Sporus. This time, in order to please the people of Rome, he himself took on the male role, demonstrating that even emperors had to balance personal desires with public expectations. However, some of Emperor Nero's actions would be considered deeply disturbing by modern standards. In one shocking case, to ensure that society perceived him as the dominant male figure in his relationship with the boy Sporus, Nero ordered the boy to be castrated, a cruel act committed solely for the sake of image and control. There are other examples of Nero's harsh or brutal treatment of his lovers, but it is difficult to determine exactly which of them are true. The most shocking allegation about Nero is the ancient accusation of incest with his mother, Agrippina the Younger. This accusation is found mainly in the works of the historian Suetonius, the 12 Caesars, and more cautiously, in Tacitus's Annals. Both sources suggest that Agrippina herself initiated the relationship in order to maintain control over Nero after he became emperor. Although the accusation of incest became an infamous part of Nero's dark legend, it is almost unanimously regarded as a malicious fabrication among respected historians. It is a striking example of how, in ancient Rome, political enemies used sexual accusations, the most shocking taboo, to destroy the reputations of their opponents posthumously. But while Nero's behavior was extreme, another emperor, Tiberius, is remembered even more darkly, especially for the way he treated the young people around him. Tiberius is often described as one of the worst offenders when it comes to abusing power over his lovers. He showed particular interest in much younger boys, and the way he treated them has led many historians to believe that he was one of the most sexually corrupt emperors in Roman history. Much of this took place far from the public eye. Tiberius spent many of his later years in luxurious villas on Mediterranean islands, especially on the island of Capri. Boys were brought there, officially as servants, but numerous accounts suggest that they were also used to satisfy his sexual desires. Some stories about Tiberius are probably exaggerated. Roman historians often added shocking details to portray their subjects in the worst possible light. But even if only part of it is true, it paints a disturbing picture of how absolute power could be used in the Roman Empire. Thank you to everyone who liked and subscribed to the channel. What do you think about this? Write in the comments, and see you in the next video.